And to introduce our next inductee, please welcome to the stage member of California Sports Hall of Fame and the NBA Hall of Fame, Bill Walton.
On November 11th, 1959, the history of the world was changed forever when Jim Gray was born. He was the third son of Jerry and Lorna Gray. Jerry sadly passed away 5 years, a great friend to us all, always was a member of the team and at all the big events. Lorna is here with us tonight. As well as one of Jim's older brothers, Mike. Gary could not be here, but I'm told that Mike was the best big brother that anyone could ever have. Having a big brother myself, I find that hard to believe. Jim, Gary, Mike, the Gray family, they grew up in Denver. Fantastic home, terrific neighborhoods, incredible public schools. Jim was an avid TV watcher and a great sportsman in his own right. A state champion in tennis and a fierce competitor in football and basketball as well. Like anyone who ultimately becomes a champion, salute all the great ones, Barry, Jamal, Marcus, Bob Miller, there's tons of you here tonight. People who become champions, they have heroes in their lives. As a young boy, Jim idolized Floyd Little, the Hall of Famer for the Denver Broncos. He also idolized Muhammad Ali, a man who by himself did more to change our world than anyone before Jim Gray came along. Being the TV watcher and sports fan that Jim was, he had his television idols as well. Kurt Gowdy and Howard Cosell. Also, Bob Martin in the Denver market calling the Broncos and the basketball teams, the Rockets and the Nuggets. Jim, who went to CU Boulder, studied journalism, honor student all the way through. Jim, in his free time, was also a videotape editor at the local ABC station back in his hometown of Denver, 30 miles away, south of CU Boulder. Jim would go back and forth all the time between his studies. One day at work, he was editing some tape. Muhammad Ali showed up at the studio. There was nobody there to interview him. They looked around and they finally said, "Jim, you take care of this." Jim borrowed a sport coat. The rest is history. Bob Arum and Don King saw that interview on television. They immediately called Jim and they hired him. And he's been working for both of them ever since. It can often be said about a man, about a person, you are defined by who your friends are. We just saw the most incredible 30-minute video of Jim's life. And if you look at these two tables down here, all of Jim's guests, from John Black, from Mike at Riviera, from John to Bobby, to Dean, to Susie, to Mark, to Tom, to Mike, to Lorna, to Joe, and we'll save Fran for later. But the sense of Jim chasing that dream and having that dream come true, and just think of the timeline for Jim Gray. Because when he graduated from CU Boulder in 1981, he applied inexplicably for a job in Philadelphia, and he got the job. And while he was there, he worked on the Phillies broadcasts, worked on the local news, but he also worked on the 76ers broadcasts. His broadcast partners in those days were, for the Phillies, Tim McCarver. For the 76ers, Chuck Daly. Then, after 3 years there, at a time when Dr. J and the 76ers won a championship, and Jim became very, very good friends with Dr. J. And when you're Dr. J's friend, all the doors open. And that is what happened to Jim. But Jim quickly left and came to Los Angeles, where he's been ever since. And in 1984, when he went to work for ESPN for the first time, ESPN, just a fledgling network, 5 years into their history, Jim became ESPN's only sports reporter. One guy for the entire network. As soon as Peter Ueberroth and Bud Greenspan, who were running the Olympics in 1984 here in Los Angeles, as soon as they knew that Jim Gray was on the spot, they hired him immediately and they said, Jim, tell us how to do this job here and run the Olympics. But from those early days, 84 to 87, Jim was building a remarkable career. And at that point, NBC and Dick Ebersol hired Jim on the national level and paired him appropriately with Bob Costas. And he worked with Bob every show, every sport, all the time for 3 years. And then Jim got hired by CBS, where he was paired on every show, on every sport, all the time, with Brent Musburger. And then Jim followed the NBA package and a lot of other packages from CBS to NBC. Jim was there for 10 years before making the transition, again following the NBA and a lot of other sports, from NBC to ESPN and ABC. And it was actually a remarkable run for the Roses for Jim. And when you think of all the different things he's done, I had to write some of them down because I have no memory. Jim Gray, Olympic Games, covered those 10 different times. Super Bowls, 36 different times. The World Series, 9 different times. The NBA Finals, 28 different times. The Final Four, 24 different times. The Masters, 27 different times. Boxing, Jim called more than 1,200 championship fights. Jim called more than 2,300 total fights. Jim was a 12-time Emmy Award winner. Jim was a 12-time Sports Reporter of the Year. Jim is already in multiple boxing Hall of Fames, including the International and the California. Many more. He's in the Colorado Hall of Excellence. He's got his Hollywood Star of Fame. Laurie and I were there. The only people who weren't there were dead. And they sent videos. But now let's talk about Jim the Man. Because, well, this is the California Sports Hall of Fame. Jim Gray, my friend, is in the Hall of Fame of life. It was February 24th, 2008. Not that I remember the date. But I got off the plane. For 18 years of my life, I spent every weekend with Jim Gray. The day before, we were someplace in the middle of nowhere, and I flew home on the 24th. When I got to San Diego, I could no longer move. My spine had failed. I didn't tell anyone. Laurie knew. She was caring for me. But when I didn't show up for work the next weekend, for the first time in those 18 years, Jim said, well, where's Bill? They said, well, Bill's on the floor, Jim, and he can't move. And Jim called me every day. He came to visit me as often as he possibly could, although never missing an assignment of his own. Jim would always tell me, don't give up, Bill. You can make this. I had given up. I was going to kill myself. My life was not worth living. Jim found my spine surgeon. Jim found the medical device company NuVasive that has saved my life. And for those 4.5 years, every day, Jim would call. And the message was always the same. Bill, don't give up. You can make this. I didn't believe him. But that didn't stop Jim Gray. Because Jim Gray was one of those remarkable forces of nature that lives his life to see other people succeed. Jim is always looking to serve the needs of others. Jim is always looking for that opportunity to jump in and say, what can I do to help make this better? And so when I finally did start to get better, Jim, he called his great friends, Joe and Gavin Maloof, owners of the Sacramento Kings. And Jim said, Joe and Gavin, hey man, you got to give this poor guy Bill a job. He just lost everything in his life. And Joe and Gavin, they stepped right up and they said, we'll take care of this. There are no finer people that I've ever known in my life than Joe and Gavin Maloof and their entire family. Their mom was here today, and what Joe and Gavin have done for the NBA, for the sports world, what they continue to do with the Las Vegas Golden Knights, absolutely spectacular and incredible. And then, when I started to get better, and Joe and Gavin were scratching their heads and saying, why did we ever do this? And they were starting to lose their patience with me. Jim called up Howard Deneroff in Westwood One, who runs the nation's largest radio network, sports radio network. And Jim said to Howard, hey, Howard, you got to give Bill a job here. And so for the last, I'm not sure how many years, I have no memory, but Jim has been my boss at Westwood One Radio as we cover the Final Four for Howard and Westwood One. And to give you an example of what it's like to work with Jim Gray, you don't really work with him, you work for him. Because he's the kind of guy who asks you a question and then 2 words into your answer, he's already answering the question for you while he's formulating the next question in his life. But to work with Jim Gray is a dream come true. And you see all the people in that video who not only worked with and for Jim, but ultimately became his friend. And so while I'm here tonight to present Jim into the California Sports Hall of Fame class of 2019, a well-deserved and long overdue honor, Jim. But I want the world to know that Jim Gray has been in the Hall of Fame of life forever. From the earliest days when I first met Jim at the Up Close and Sports World Roy Firestone Studios down in Hollywood back in 1990, when Jim was already an established star, and people like Howie Long, Jim Rome, and me were just getting started, Jim was always the most supportive and the most encouraging. I'm sure that has something to do with how much work I really needed. But with Jim, the incredible passion in his life, the passion and love that he has for his wife, Fran with 2 N's, Fran of 23 years now. Jim and Fran were introduced by Jim's great broadcast partner, Chuck Daly. And when they got married in Hawaii 23 years ago, the best men were Chuck Daly and Dr. J. Who are your friends? Who's standing up for you? I'm here to stand up for my friend Jim Gray, because here's a guy who, when I was at my lowest point, when I had nothing, Jim Gray was still my friend. And he was the one who encouraged me to keep going. And so, yes, Bob Dylan did write the song, With God on Your Side. He wasn't the only one. The Grateful Dead, they wrote Saint of Circumstance, For This Tiger in a Trance. Neil Young, When God Made Me. And so as we honor this intergalactic treasure tonight, please bear in mind that this is really one of those special souls that more than a colleague, more than a talent, more than a professional, I'm honored to stand here tonight as Jim Gray's friend and present him into this year's California Sports Hall of Fame. Jim Gray, we love you very much. I love Jim Gray.
I don't have to go to my funeral. Thank God I'm still alive to have been able to hear all that. Cut my mic already, Bill? I love Bill Walton. And Bill Walton's a great example for all of us. For those 19 years that I traveled with Bill, which has now become 30 years, Bill, every day of Coach Wooden's life, would get on the telephone, even before we had cell phones, and call from the airport with his credit card every single time. Coach, Bill Walton here, W-A-L-T-O-N. Pick up your telephone, Coach. I'm calling to check on you, see how you're doing. And Bill would just keep talking and had one of those machines, and finally Coach Wooden would pick up. Yes, William, I'm here. Coach, are you okay? Well, he did this every day. Every day that I was with him, every time we were together, he checked on Coach Wooden. Not once, but twice a day to make sure that he was okay in his apartment. So that was the example that he gave to me when he was in trouble. And Coach Wooden loved Bill. And they were so diametrically opposite other than wanting to win basketball games. I mean, Bill has amazing stories, and I won't get into them, but here's a guy who took stationery from Coach Wooden's office because he didn't like the way that Bill and the people of the 60s were protesting the Vietnam War, and Coach Wooden told him to write a letter. So we went and got Coach Wooden's stationery, wrote a letter to President Nixon asking him to resign, got all the players on the team to sign it, and then took it to Coach Wooden to sign. You asked me to write a letter. Here it is, Coach, please sign this. William, I don't think that's best for you to send that. Bill sent it, Nixon resigned. Lori, thank you. You are the true angel of mercy. Tonight is my 23rd wedding anniversary. Fran, thank you for all of your love and support. You have been in the Hall of Fame long, long before we got to Canastota and here to Ontario. I am the very proud son of Lorna and Jerry Gray. So grateful to have my mom with me here this evening as she gets ready to come up on her 88th birthday. And my dad was my hero and my best friend. He certainly would have loved this evening and would have loved this honor. Christian Okoye, thank you so much for including me and for picking me to receive this special recognition and honor. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, but I have spent my entire adult life virtually here in the Golden State. I'm honored to be a resident of this state. It's the greatest place in the world. I also am honored to be with all of these folks, particularly my dear and close friend, Barry Bonds. Barry, thank you for letting me be the only guy to interview you after 7:15. Thank you for letting me be the only guy to interview you after 7:55. Thank you for letting me be the only guy to interview you after 7:62. I will never forget it. We'll always be grateful to you, and I hope that those who vote in Cooperstown are seeing what is happening here this evening, and that you open your heart and open your doors to Barry Bonds, because if there is such a thing as a Hall of Fame, Barry Bonds belongs in it. As Bill stated, my journey here is an unlikely one. When I was 17 years old, I was a videotape editor for the ABC station in Denver. They were converting from film to videotape. All of the guys who were in the union took the buyout, didn't want to learn a new craft. I was sitting in my edit bay editing the Red Miller show for the Denver Broncos. The Red Miller show for the Denver Broncos. Muhammad Ali arrived at Stapleton International Airport 2.5 hours early. They couldn't find the sports anchors. They couldn't find the news anchors. Nobody had a cell phone. Nobody had beepers. If you didn't answer your home phone at 7 o'clock in the morning, they couldn't find you. Well, they couldn't find anybody, so the lady who was the assignment editor came running in. She said, "You know a little bit about sports, don't you?" I said, "Well, yeah." She said, "Go interview Muhammad Ali. He's coming to town to promote his fight with Leon Spinks, and he's going to fight Lyle Alzado, a Denver Bronco, and we need somebody to do the interview." I went out there, and Ali gave me 45 minutes. It was an amazing experience, even though the weatherman's coat and tie didn't fit. I somehow got it done, as you saw in that videotape. I came back and was editing myself out, and a man by the name of Roger Ogden, who had given me my first opportunity, looked at the videotape, and he was mesmerized. Not with me, but with Ali. And he looked at it again. The guy didn't even know my name. And then after an hour and a half in my edit booth, he said, "This interview, you, and this tape are barely adequate. We're going to put you on the air." So I tell everybody ever since, I've been barely adequate. Well, somehow barely adequate ended up here on this stage here this evening. No one in television does anything by themselves. I've had so many great colleagues and broadcasters that I've worked with, and I owe an awful lot to a ton of directors and producers and graphics folks, and I just wanted to be on the team, and it's my teammates really who have lifted me to this moment. I want to thank all the terrific camera women, cameramen, graphics people, makeup artists. If you can work with this, you can work with anything. And all of those folks who really do all of their work for us. I've been so fortunate to work for ESPN, NBC, CBS, and the platform that they have afforded me has just been amazing, and I'm lucky to be able to continue to have those platforms currently with Showtime, Fox, and Westwood One Radio. It's a blessing that I get to do what I love, and I'm grateful to them for being allowed to continue. My career has been based on relationships, and Bill went into a lot of it. And I wouldn't have achieved anything in sports had it not been for the guidance and the mentoring of Chuck Daly and Al Davis. Tonight, I'm wearing something I've never worn. This is a ring from the Dream Team that was given to me by Chuck Daly. Chuck introduced me to my wife, was my first broadcast partner, and I miss him every day. He was a wonderful mentor. If you can mentor somebody in your life, you should be so lucky to have someone like Chuck Daly. And I will never forget and will always be grateful to Al Davis for the trust that he placed in me and for all of the stories, all of the interviews, all of the time that he had spent. And I am so lucky to have Mark Davis here this evening and to be here to carry that flame which burns so bright. Mark, thank you for so much, and thank you for everything from the Davis family. I also owe a deep debt of gratitude for their trust and friendship and for allowing me into their inner circle to the great Julius Erving, the amazing Eric Dickerson, the one and only Kobe Bryant, the sensational Mike Tyson, the logo Jerry West, Floyd Money Mayweather, the incredible Bill Walton, and my radio partners every Monday night. The NFL Man of the Year, Larry Fitzgerald, and the incomparable, incredible Tom Brady. I want to thank the original Tom Brady, Tom Brady Sr., for going so far out of his way to be here with me tonight. I love you. I love your family, Galen, all your girls, and of course, Tom and Giselle, Benny, Vivi, and Jack. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Tom. I also want to thank the California teams that have played such an important part in my career. In addition to the Raiders, I have deep gratitude and appreciation to the Spanos family. Dean and Susie Spanos, their children, and most importantly, their mother and father, the great Alex and Faye Spanos. Please support the Chargers. Please support the Chargers in this market. They're worthy, and they've got a great team. Thank you, Dean. Joe and Gavin Maloof, and their mom, Colleen, brothers George and Philip, sister Adrian. They were great stewards of the Sacramento Kings, and now, as Bill alluded to, the Las Vegas Golden Knights in the NHL. Let me just say this about Joe and Gavin Maloof. You can't have better friends, because these people wouldn't give you the shirt off their back. They'd give you the skin. Thank you, JoJo. My good friend John Shaw, thank you so much for being here. John led and was at the helm during his time and tenure with the Los Angeles Rams. Thank you all for going so far out of your way this evening. We also want to congratulate Dr. Jerry Buss and the entire Buss family. Jerry was a huge help in my career, and the great John Black, who was their PR director for a long time, was very helpful with his guidance during his tenure with the Los Angeles Lakers. Finally, I've been blessed with many lasting friendships that I treasure with great loyalty and love. Everyone has played a role. Some are here this evening: Mark Antanasio, Mike Meldman, Herbie Simon, my college buddy who's been with me my whole life, Gary Romero, sitting right down here, Michael Yamaki, who sees me all the time out at Riviera. Thank you, Michael. And of course, Bobby Friedman. Thank you, Bobby. I also want to thank my dear friend Tillman Fertitta. He's one of my sponsors. He has been for a long, long time. He's been with us on Monday Night Football, the Landry's Corporations. Please, please go eat at Mastro's and Morton's. I see you guys clapping. And also want to thank Terry Lundgren and the great folks at Macy's. Been blessed with a great mother and father, also blessed with great brothers. My brother Mike is here this evening. My sister-in-law Sherry, just getting over an illness. Thank God she's going to be well. And my brother Gary couldn't make it tonight. Also got great nieces and nephews. And my biggest fan, Fran's father. I call him Philly Vetter Gray. His name's Phil Vetter, and his wife Risa. This evening and this honor has touched me in a way that's indescribable. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart, as my journey in sports broadcasting really has been, in reality, much, much more than anything I could have ever dreamed. Thank you all.
How do you interview the interviewer? Imagine my fear. Barry Bonds didn't bother me, but Jim Gray does. Here's how you have to interview Jim Gray. You have to call the people he knows. Jim Gray knows everybody. He knows everybody out there. And there's a great story behind every story that he brings to you. So I started with Eric Dickerson, of course, right? So Jim was with Eric the night Eric found out he got traded at Eric's house. And there was a crazy story that went on when you got that interview. Can you tell everyone that?
Well, Eric wanted to be paid $1 million, and maybe John Shaw can come up here and talk about that, but he really just wanted to be paid by the Los Angeles Rams $1 million, and so he had this contentious relationship with the front office with Georgia Frontiere and turned contentious with John Robinson when he asked him to run gap 47. So Eric, at the time, was only talking to me, and I was with ESPN, and I had just stayed in touch with him. He said, why don't you come to me to a Halloween party? And this was Halloween. So I went over there to go to the Halloween party, and he got a call from Ron Meyer in the Indianapolis Colts. And he said he'd been traded. And I said, you've been traded? When he hung up the phone, he said, yeah, I'm going to Indianapolis. I don't think I can go to the party. I have to catch a jet to go to New York. I said, what time's the plane to New York? He said, 11:45 at night, gonna fly overnight. I said, did they say you couldn't say anything? He said, no. I said, can we do this interview on ESPN? Please, can we do this interview on ESPN? And Eric said, well, I guess so. Nobody said I couldn't. Well, the clubs weren't going to announce it until that Sunday. This was on Friday. And so we took his car, and once again, I had to borrow clothes. I usually don't have my own clothes. I was in a Halloween costume. So Eric gave me his jacket and his tie, which was about 18 sizes way too big. We somehow made it work. We went speeding down the highway, got there about 1 minute before, got a ticket, talked my way out of a ticket. I said, this is Eric Dickerson. You're going to give Eric a ticket? And the guy said, no, but I'm driving. So he didn't give me a ticket, but we parked the car. We got a parking ticket, which Eric had to pay for because it didn't come to my house. But we did the interview, and Tom Mees on that evening, rest his soul, he's passed away. He said that was the night that actually changed everything for ESPN. They moved from a highlights show showing yesterday's highlights to an actual news gathering organization. So
wow.
I'm grateful to Eric Dickerson forever. Put me on the map.
I cannot tell you, because I'm a journalist, I know what it takes to do this job. I do this job. And so we have to ask the questions people don't ask, or people want to know, but other reporters don't have the skill or ability to ask, or they're just afraid. How do you ask those kind of tough questions? You're the person to ask. What does it take? Is it courage? What does it take?
I think it takes natural curiosity and to approach it in a way that's not malicious or mean-spirited. And whatever goes on the field should be fair game. What goes on off the field, and only if it affects what happens in the game, shouldn't be in our purview, okay? So if a guy who's being asked, or a gal, something that has happened on the field of play, if they can't take a question from me, how are they going to face their opponents? It's just a question, and we all saw it, so it's just a natural curiosity. It's what you would think at home. It's what everybody watching wants to know and think. So I don't think that takes a lot of courage. I just think it takes common sense.
And the ability to ask the question, which isn't always easy. So next I went to the Lakers' John Black, and I called him to find out, what could I ask Jim Gray? And he said, ask him about his nickname, Scratchy.
Well, Jack Nicholson, who you saw in the video, is a dear friend and became a dear friend in the 80s when I moved out here to Los Angeles. And Jack would watch the Laker games, every game in basketball, and he had a VCR and would record things. So he would call me sometimes at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, right after Al Davis had hung up, because Al used to like to call late at night, and he would start asking me, what did you think about what went on there in the third quarter? And I'm sound asleep, and I'm thinking, which game are you watching? So anyway, I had done an interview, and Jack called up one night, and he said, got a little scratchy with those people tonight, didn't you? Just keep scratching and digging for the story there, Scratch. I'm always going to go for the performer, you know, because I'm with the performers and the talent. But you keep digging. So he started calling me Scratchy. And because we played golf all the time, people thought it was because I was a good golfer. Then they saw me play, and they found out that wasn't the case. But that's how I got the nickname Scratchy.
And back to the Muhammad Ali story, it's so legendary. First of all, 17 years old working in the business is already legendary in itself. So you run out to the airport, here's Muhammad Ali, right? You're 17 years old, you can do an interview with him. What's the first question you asked him?
I'd have to look at the tape, I'm not sure.
I'm not for sure you would remember.
No.
What did you think of your interview at 17 years old with Muhammad Ali?
I was so enamored and so in awe of being able to sit down with Muhammad Ali and being able to ask him questions of a guy that I, would watch with my dad on closed circuit TV. We would go down to the Paramount Theater in Denver, or we would go to one of the local theaters or watch on Wide World of Sports. And now all of a sudden, this guy is sitting right here in front of me, and he's being nice to me, and he's having fun with me. And he enjoyed the experience because he enjoyed the experience. It put me so at ease. And it started a lifetime relationship. And the greatest thing that happened to me was that Ali liked me. He then let me come to all of his fights, do these interviews, and to make a long story real short, he was my first interview. And then in 2004, he allowed me to take him up to the Stanford pool. So we had Muhammad Ali, Carl Lewis, who was the greatest track and field ever, still is, with 9 gold medals, Ray Leonard, and Mary Lou Retton, who was the person who made gymnastics in our country after Nadia and Olga Korbut. She popularized it. So we took America's 4 greatest living Olympians 2 nights before Michael Phelps went to Athens. He had never won a medal. And we went up there, and it was Muhammad Ali's last interview on television. And the last things that he said was, "Who do you want to fight next?" Me. And then when we went off camera, we had a torch from Athens that had been sent. And Ali took that torch and he said, "I'm the greatest, you're the latest, it's now up to you." And he handed the torch to Michael Phelps.
Congratulations. And continue on, because we could talk all night, I'm sure. Congratulations,
Thank you, Liz. Thank
Jim.
you all very much. Appreciate it.